How did it feel to have that period after 12 years?
I felt so feminine and I felt quite emotional. It felt like very symbolically letting go of, but also just so hopeful, because I'd also shut off from the idea of having children. And then all of a sudden I was like, maybe I can.
Can you tell me, what are the two conditions that you live with?
Relative energy deficiency in sport and secondary hypothalamic amenorrhea. Now, they are overlapping conditions. So secondary hypothalamic amenorrhea essentially means you've lost your period after it started.
So you are in the midst of being a semi-professional athlete, you've had periods, they've disappeared, and you've maybe started to think, oh, that's a little bit weird, that's a little bit strange. What happens next for you?
So the fact that that wasn't communicated to me by the doctors, and they basically just said, go away, come back when you've stopped doing sport.
You've talked about grief, you've used the word grief quite a lot actually in this conversation. Did you feel like you had a lot of your teenage years or young adolescence taken away? Did you feel like there was a lot of loss surrounding?
I think I definitely feel a loss.
Ash, welcome to the Girl Chat. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm really excited for our chat because we have two conditions that I actually personally have not even heard of before. So when you reached out and you shared your story, I was really excited because I always want to introduce new conditions, new stories into this conversation, because the community, A, will be really interested, and we may have a lot of girls in the community already that potentially have it diagnosed or undiagnosed.
Yeah. I think both of these conditions that we'll obviously chat about, they are actually so much more common, or increasingly becoming so much more common. And I remember when I first was diagnosed with them, or not even really properly diagnosed for so long, they were really unspoken about, and it's kind of getting there, but they're still, very much under the radar.
Well, this is definitely a place for that.
Yeah.
We hear that's one of the biggest things I think on the podcast is we need to talk about this more, or we need to give this awareness. So can you tell me, what are the two conditions that you live with?
Yeah. So I'm actually recovered now, but very recently. And actually the two conditions were relative energy deficiency in sport and secondary hypothalamic amenorrhea. Now, they are overlapping conditions. So secondary hypothalamic amenorrhea essentially means you've lost your period after it started. So you could have primary hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is where your period never began. And then the secondary is if it stops after it has begun once. And then REDS is more specifically about a cause of hypothalamic amenorrhea. So it's the fact that you have lost your period as a result of an energy imbalance due to the fact that you are either over-exercising or under-eating. And it predominantly was assumed to only affect elite athletes. I was training at a semi-professional level for sport, so that does apply to me. But actually increasingly, and this is why it's such a problem that needs to be spoken about, more and more, especially young women, are training like elite athletes now. You know, we're seeing this huge rise in running. It's pretty commonplace to run a marathon now. And that is training like an athlete. So as a result, more and more young women and young men can be affected by relative energy deficiency in sport, and that can cause huge hormonal problems.
Fascinating. So like you mentioned, we've had two huge careers or kind of chapters in your life in terms of semi-professional athlete, and then you're now a journalist. And women's health comes into both of those in very different ways. So to kind of get an understanding of what your life was like when these conditions came into it and were present, can you talk me through like what is a classic daily life routine for you when you were training as a semi-professional athlete?
So this all happened to me quite young, because I started my period when I think I was about 13, 14, and within a year it had gone again. So that's when I lost it. And so I was training almost full time for sport alongside trying to do school, you know? So I was training over 40 hours a week, I would say. So,
over 40 hours?
Maybe at that stage, not quite, but it got to that point as I grew up. But I was training at least, 2 to 3 hours a day after school, 4 to 5 days a week, and then pretty much like a 5-hour session at the track on a Saturday. So,
Oh my God.
I was missing lessons by the time I got to sixth form because I was having to go and train. So my day was like completely structured around exercise. And because I was kind of coming from school, going straight to the track, there was that classic lack of knowledge really about how I should be fueling my body, because I was training like a professional athlete. But my body didn't have the recovery tools or, you know, the fueling, because I wasn't just lying down between sessions. I was going to class and I was hanging out with my friends and all of that. So essentially I was trying to juggle being a normal teenager with training, you know, upwards of 30 hours.
I just can't even wrap my head around what that would look like.
Yeah.
Like, we all have memories of what our routine was like as a teenager. And I remember, I mean, I do live with endometriosis, so I can caveat it with, I know that fatigue was there even if I didn't realise it was there. But I can just remember going to school and just feeling naturally tired and kind of thinking after a school day, like, oh, I'm so excited to go and just like wind down or maybe play in the close or kind of just chill in the evening. But you were having full-time education, almost like a full-time career.
Yeah, totally. And it did become all-consuming and in an extremely positive, but also, I think, slightly obsessive way. Like, you know, I lost a lot of friends as I got older. Once I was around 16 and I became so serious about sport. A lot of my friendships, I remember friends even calling me boring because I couldn't go to the social things. And I chose that. That was my decision. But it is hard because you are dedicating your life to something at a very young age that's very different from the norm. For context, I did heptathlon, which is 7 different track and field events, hence why I had to train so much.
Oh my God.
7 events to fit in. So
walk me through those 7 events.
So on the first day you have hurdles, high jump, shot put and 200, and then you sleep overnight and then you come back the second day and you do long jump, javelin, 800.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You're like Superwoman. That's incredible. That's such a diverse range of skills as well. Like, you know, being a professional like athlete, like a track runner for whatever distance is incredible, especially when you watch the Olympics and things. But to do 7 different skill sets.
It demands a lot on your body. And kind of for this conversation and the relevance to that is also, obviously, it's a highly image and weight based sport. So for something like a high jump or a long jump, the lighter you are, the deemed benefit there is. Obviously, when you're more educated and with a really good coach that understands, they would be able to educate you on the fact that it's a very fine balance between being lighter and then not being strong. Like really what you need to be is strong. But obviously track athletes and heptathletes, they wear tiny little kit, you know, it's little pants and a crop top, and so you're very exposed at a very young age. You're looking at all these other girls who are maybe a bit older, they have shredded abs and ripped muscles and not a lot of body fat, and it can really send you down a spiral, especially as your body is changing and growing through puberty. You're not the finished product yet. You're not going to look like the 25-year-old athlete you see on TV, except I wanted to look like that. So that's where it all feeds in and is complicated.
There's a lot of layers to this, because you mentioned when you're explaining about the conditions that energy and you're coming back to school, missing classes, having busy schedules. And I know for you there's a big relationship around food. So how did that start to come in? Because you're talking about body image on the track with the tiny outfits and then your routine. What happened there?
So I think, like I was saying about the kind of obsessiveness that happens, is when you want to be really good at something, you obviously kind of leave that no stone unturned mindset. And the athlete mindset is very much like, how can I be better? How can I win? How can my performance improve? And because there is a real lack of education, or there was when I was growing up, and it's still pretty bad, I think, within young athletes and even in schools, of what energy and strength and health looks like. In my mind, smaller and leaner would be better. Like, I would be better. So my issues around food initially stemmed from that drive for performance. I kind of associated eating less and getting leaner with the fact that I would become better at sport. And I think in the short term, there were times when that did improve and I did see gains, but I also very quickly, it became a psychological thing and a bit another level of a kind of obsession and compulsion. And even then, when my performances were suffering, I still wouldn't relate them back to the fact that maybe I wasn't fueling my body enough.
The word control comes to mind as well when I hear you talking about it. Kind of, you have to have control over your routine, control over your training. Obviously, food and energy and nutrition come into that. So that sounds very complicated for even a 30-year-old or someone in their 20s who's a professional athlete to comprehend all those things. For a young teenage girl that's going through puberty, that just feels like a minefield.
Well, totally, exactly, and I think because there isn't the education and athletics lacks a lot of funding.
Okay.
So unlike maybe a football academy program or something where there would be the whole support network around it, in athletics, you generally, unless you're on a really high performance pathway, will just have your coach. So they don't necessarily know or how to educate you on stuff. So you're not being monitored, you're not being tracked. No one's asking about your period. No one's asking about the fact that you've dropped weight or what you're eating. It's not really addressed. So the problem can kind of fall under the radar.
Gosh, that is not something that I ever, as a completely like outside person with no knowledge of this world whatsoever, you would just make that presumption that if you're going down that professional pathway of any kind of sport, especially at a young age, because it feels like that's such an important time to nurture someone in all areas of like nutrition and physio and psychology and all those things. But okay, so it's just you and your coach.
Yeah, I mean, eating disorders are rife in track and field.
Really?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Wow. Is it more women than men, or is it quite gender diverse?
I think it is. My understanding was that it was always very gendered.
Okay.
Increasingly on social media, I'm seeing a few more male athletes come out and talk about REDS actually, and talk about, especially in distance running, because they very much have to be lighter, or that's their kind of feeling, and that underfueling is a huge problem in men as well. But I think it's still a gendered thing for sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to hold this here and then just quickly, whilst we're talking about you in your teenage years, you mentioned obviously you started your periods, but you only had a year or so of a period. So what were they like when you did have them?
So they were light for sure. And they weren't super regular, but that's pretty normal, I think, when you're first starting your periods as it settles. Yeah. So I definitely, I had consistent periods. They maybe weren't exactly on the month as they should be, but they were there, they were present. I figured out how to use a tampon. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like I had one and then it was gone. Yeah. So but I never had problematic periods, I wouldn't say.
Okay.
Yeah.
So once you kind of hit that stage of your life, you're thinking, right, we're going to get, like all teenage girls, we're going to get to grips with this. We're going to learn what this means for me. Yeah. What was their thought process? What was your reaction when they disappeared? Or was that maybe a bit of a delayed response for you?
A hugely delayed response, because initially first, I mean, at that stage, again, it all comes back to this lack of education, because I definitely wasn't tracking my periods or anything like that. So they would just like pop up every now and then. I'd be like, oh God, right, okay. And then when they kind of went, I wasn't even thinking about it. And I was like, whatever. Didn't really notice. Probably wasn't like till a year after they were gone that I was like, that is really weird. Like, I haven't had a period in ages. But then again, wasn't really bothered, because I was kind of like, this is so convenient. And that was the problem, is I was like, all my friends are having to deal with tampons, like they're having to compete on their periods. Like, I don't want to compete on my period. It makes me bloated. It makes you more tired. You have to worry about bleeding through when you're not wearing very much. All of those things. But I was like, this is perfect. I don't have to deal with this. So at first, I honestly didn't even consider that it was a problem.
Yeah. As you were literally saying that, I literally was thinking, God, in some ways I can see that being so convenient when your pure focus is, I am going to win, get better, get stronger, be quicker, whatever it might be. And, I think for loads of women, even when you go through a journey probably similar to what you've been through, what I've been through, when you get older, I have a very different relationship with my body now and my periods, and I love what that part of my body is doing and why it's so important. But, for a long time, I think all of us can relate to that, like, oh, really? Like, it happens when you're socialising, or when you've got a nice thing going on, or you're going on holiday. That always happens for me. Yeah. Like, when you're going on holiday, you just think, oh, what a pain. I know. Like, can you just not do this week? So
no, totally. And I think that's kind of at the core of, undeniably our periods can be a bit of a pain in the bum. But I think the fact that we have had that perception of them has almost made us not pay attention to them in the way that we should. Like, we now know that it's like the fifth vital sign of health, but like, I didn't think of it in that way at all. I just thought this is a really annoying thing that happens every month. Like, I didn't consider or understand what it was doing and what I was then lacking.
Absolutely. And you're right, we are now moving towards a time when we're thinking, God, this life sign, like you say, this health sign is incredible, and we can learn so much from it. And we're looking at whether it can detect cervical cancer, whether we can potentially diagnose endometriosis using menstrual blood. But that is a long road, isn't it, to changing our relationship with our period.
Hugely long road. Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so you are in the midst of being a semi-professional athlete, you've had periods, they've disappeared, and you've maybe started to think, oh, that's a little bit weird, that's a little bit strange. What happens next for you?
So it was actually my mum, and I'm super grateful that she was very invested in my athletics career, and it was her who said, I'm worried about like your bone health, because I had a stress fracture or stress injury at around the age of 15, 16.
Oh, wow.
My foot. And stress responses and injuries are often a result of overtraining, but also a lack of bone like density. And when you don't have a period, it's often related to a lack of estrogen.
Yes.
And that is what can contribute ultimately to osteoporosis, which is brittle bones, which is such a dangerous condition that often affects women in menopause. So you wouldn't associate it with teenage girls, but it is a problem. And actually there was a very high profile runner called Bobby Clay who did amazing work for raising awareness around REDS at the time, because she had osteoporosis. So she was an amazing distance runner, but she was chronically underfueled, and then she developed osteoporosis as a result. And I can't remember how many fractures she had, but so many.
Oh my God.
And in the end, her career ended because of it. So I think seeing Bobby's story, and then my mum also raising the kind of alarm bells, meant that we went to the doctors about it, and we requested a DEXA scan, which tests your bone density. And I think they said yes on that occasion, and I did have one, but because it was so sort of new, and at this stage I was only about 15, so I'd only lost my period for a year, I think my bone density came back within range. But that's not to say it wasn't getting worse. And I think that's where the lack of education, even in the medical teams, was they didn't flag it. They were just like, your bone density's fine, go away. And they were like, you're just doing a lot of sport. Periods go when you do a lot of sport. They'll come back when you stop doing sport. And that's really bad advice, because
that's awful advice.
And because it was so normalised at the time that athletes lose their period. But it's actually not a normal thing. It's a sign that your body is saying, essentially, we don't have enough energy to house a baby right now, so we're going to switch off your reproductive system to focus on survival and movement. You know, it's the things that you need to keep functioning, and pregnancy is not deemed as an essential thing for functioning, so that's why your body switches it off. So the fact that that wasn't communicated to me by the doctors, and they basically just said, go away, come back when you've stopped doing sport, meant that I then walked away for another 2 or 3 years and didn't do anything about it.
Wow.
And then I went back a second time, and we were kind of like, look, they still haven't come back. We are a bit concerned about this. Like, it's not normal and it's not good. And their answer was basically, we'll go on the pill then.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
which
God.
I know is the solution to every female health problem, it seems.
I thought I've heard the pill used for every possible scenario, but no, that's even a new one. The whole concern and the whole point of the appointment is, I don't have a period and I think I should. And their response is, go on the pill, which is definitely not going to bring a period back.
No.
It might add a withdrawal bleed.
Exactly.
But it also might not, but that's still not a period.
Exactly. And that's the bit that, again, wasn't communicated, that that's a withdrawal bleed. Not actually. It's basically a sticking plaster over a wound, because it makes you think, oh, I'm bleeding, all good. But actually it's not. It's artificial hormones, rather than your body actually producing the hormones that it's supposed to be producing. So I went on the pill, and then I came off the pill again because it made me gain weight. And obviously I was doing sport, so I was like, I don't like that. It also, I didn't feel great mentally on it. So I know some people do struggle with like depression on the pill, and you can try different ones, but ultimately, so I went on it for a few months, came back off it, and they were like, well, if you don't want to go on the pill, we can't really help you anymore. So I again then just sort of went away again.
Oh my God.
At the time, I think I then went back a third time a couple of years later, and they tested my blood markers and my hormones, and it came back that my estrogen levels were close to 0. So my estrogen was in the pits, which explains a lot, because estrogen plays such a key role in like mood, energy, and I was really struggling with a lot of that on the track. My performances were starting to plateau, and I think essentially I was pretty exhausted, and my body wasn't functioning as it should.
I'm not surprised. Like that's so many years of intense training. And like you say, it's almost like if you look at a graph, things were just continuously going downhill, weren't they? Like the amount of estrogen you were having, bone density, all those things were just declining. And understandably, the doctors had just said like, oh, don't worry about it. So you just gone away and tried to carry on, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because at that stage, it's hard to advocate for yourself, I think, especially like when you don't know. So you're like, if a doctor's telling you this is the thing, you just think, oh, okay, then I won't worry about it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I went to Loughborough University, which is really amazing for sport. And I had the opportunity to work with a female nutritionist called Louise Bloor, who was absolutely brilliant. She was a former athlete herself. And it was her who first sort of gave me the term REDS in relation to myself, rather than having heard it around like Bobby Clay's story and stuff like that. She said to me, I think you're under eating. And she was like, I think you could have REDS.
Wow.
And it was the first time that someone like sort of gave me that term, because I think my mind had started to be thinking maybe, but when you have problems around eating and fueling, I think you gaslight yourself. And then if a doctor's also telling you this could be pretty normal, you're definitely like, I'm not going to say that I've got a problem. But her saying that could be a problem was, I think, a switch in my brain.
Okay.
And the start of a long road, but definitely a change in the direction. And I think that's why it's so important that we always, when we're worried about somebody else or we think something about somebody else, it's important to raise it gently with them.
Yeah. Why do you think that landed with you differently to other things that you'd seen? What was it about her saying it to you that landed differently?
I think, well, A, obviously she was educated in the space, but B, she was talking directly to me and she was facing things head on, whereas obviously I'd, late night Googled things and heard other people's stories, but it was like, am I allowed to like own this? Am I allowed to like say that this is my story when I don't know? And people are telling me other things that like it seems like it's okay.
Yeah.
Whereas her just being straight up with me and, calmly, gently, not accusingly, but supportively saying this could be something. And also because she was very clear as how this would improve my performance if I actually fueled myself better. So there was that element too, which I think is important, especially for anyone that's kind of sporty or training for a goal or whatever your goal is, whether it's to have children and you're thinking about your fertility. If somebody says to you, actually, this is going to increase your chances of having children, then you're going to be motivated, or this is going to decrease your pain or anything. So I think it's linking it to the positive outcome that could come is important.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting when I hear you talk about your relationship with her, because it makes me think of like the role of authority, because in lots of ways you had two very significant conversations with someone in a role of authority, but they ended very differently. So like the doctor was authority and understandably you trusted them like we all do, and they said, don't worry about it, just leave it and move on. So you did. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you had someone that you respected and maybe admired and also was an expert and authority who said, actually, no, I'm going to have a personal conversation tailored to you and talk to you like as an individual, which feels like is missing from so many medical conversations.
I agree. Yeah. That like person-centered approach. And because I guess, there's obviously constraints on resources and everything, but there is this kind of rushed, generic, stick a plaster on it attitude, which I think just rushes you out the room, and then you kind of leave still pretty unsure about what you were just told.
Yeah, definitely.
Even when you get your blood markers, like often, I mean, I've had so many blood tests and I can't even interpret them. And often like somebody doesn't even like call you or anything, and you're like, I don't even know what that means. You just gave me all that information. What do I do with it?
Yeah. I remember having my blood work, like the most recent one that I did, I just got kind of a general across the board done just to kind of see, because I came off contraception for the first time in a long time. And obviously I'm interested, so I like Google things and kind of learn and try and do a bit more kind of learning around nutrition things. But I'm looking at these bars on like the NHS app where, you have a range of where your like ferritin is and different things. And I'm looking at this bar going, okay, well, that's a huge bar and I'm in the bar, but I'm towards like the lower end of it. Is that a problem? Or I'm towards the higher, and there's no explanation around how good of a guide is the bar at all as a range. Should that change? Is that different to functional medicine or whatever? And what it means for you, there's no discussion around that.
No discussion. And also what I now know is that your hormone levels obviously change throughout the month. So I was tested at one point and my estrogen levels are one place, and actually maybe if I was tested another point in the month, would they have been different? I don't know. Like there's so much confusion around it, and that's it's all the nuance that's often lost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned disordered eating.
Yeah.
So when you went to GP appointments during all those years where you're kind of thinking something might be going on, but you're not quite sure, did that come up? Did you talk about that? Was it asked about?
No, and this is a really interesting thing that I think is a theme. So in my younger years, the disordered eating, I think you would definitely categorise it now as orthorexia. So it's
What's that?
obsession with healthy eating. So because I was an athlete, I wouldn't have described myself as anorexic like other people would be. I didn't look emaciated, and I wasn't technically underweight from a BMI perspective because I was very muscular.
Okay.
But I think from a body fat perspective, if that had been investigated further, it is a disorder. It is a disordered eating pattern, but it doesn't present in quite the same way. Somebody can look very healthy and muscular, and actually their body fat percentage is off and their energy resources are off.
Okay.
It was only after I stopped sport eventually, and my periods still didn't return, and due to some like family, I think honestly the grief of like letting my sport career go, but also a lot of issues at home with family, stress, and a kind of dormant eating disorder that then just like threw itself up because it was the way to control.
Okay.
And I became very thin, and I think looking back I was definitely extremely underweight at that time.
Yeah.
That is the only time that a doctor ever once said and it was when I went for my like smear test.
Yeah.
She was like, do you think you should think about gaining some weight? But that was the closest anyone ever came to saying anything.
Weird comment.
Yeah, other than some friends addressed it with me because they care about me, and my dad tried to gently approach it, but bless him, like it's a hard thing for a dad to have that conversation about.
Definitely.
But in terms of doctors, no. And the thing that I think is the reason for that is that when I went back to the doctor again after I stopped sport about my period, because I was like, right, well, I've now stopped doing competitive sport. I'm not training excessively. Why have they not come back?
Yeah.
Not addressing the fact that I was clearly very underweight. I did know deep down, but I was ignoring it. And I went back to the doctors, and at this stage, I think it was post-COVID, so all GP appointments that I was having was over the phone.
Oh.
So she didn't ask my height, my weight. She'd never seen me in real life, this GP, because she was a new GP.
Okay.
And she referred me for an internal ultrasound. So I went for an internal ultrasound, which obviously you have no consultation there, they just do it.
No.
Then the results went back to her, and she called me and she was like, you've got PCOS. And I was like, I really don't think I do. Because at this point, I'm a journalist too. I'm writing in women's health. So I know the symptoms of PCOS, which include, weight gain, acne, excessive hair.
Yeah.
I didn't have any of those symptoms. The only symptoms that I had was I'm lacking a period, and I do have cysts, or some cysts on my ovaries. But as we now know by the renaming of to PMOS, it's not necessarily just an ovarian cyst-related condition. And you can have cysts without having PCOS.
Yes.
So I actually just really didn't believe the diagnosis, because I also knew that I had so many issues around food that I wasn't talking about. And she'd never seen me, so she also didn't know.
No.
So I had this phone call and I was like, okay. And after she hung up, she never contacted me again. She didn't follow up on anything relating to if I had PMOS now.
No treatment plan.
No,
nothing.
And I just didn't, even though I was motivated to solve the problem, I think I still wasn't taking my health seriously enough, and I still was a bit like, honestly, I quite like not having a period. So I was kind of 1 foot in trying to get better and 1 foot still firmly out. So that was the problem, and that's such the psychological element of this, and I think will be affecting so many other women that I know are going through it and that have spoken to me about it since I've recovered and spoken about it.
Yeah.
So many women have got in touch with me and they're like, I want to recover, but then I'm also like hooked in this disorder and I can't recover.
We're taking a quick break to say thank you to today's sponsor, BU Period. When it comes to women's health, I'm obsessed with all things holistic and natural. My go-to product is BU's pain relief patches. The combination of menthol and eucalyptus is pure bliss when an endo flare hits. Whether it's pelvic pain, back pain, leg pain, or anything else, they give me the instant and long-lasting relief I need.
And you can even set up your own subscription so that you never run out of natural pain relief. If you want to get your hands on BU's patches, you can find the link in the show notes. And make sure you use the code INJAP10 to get your exclusive listener discount. Now let's get back to the girl chat.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I can't wait to talk about that because the psychology element, like you say, is huge. That's big. But okay, so for the timeline purpose, so you had that conversation at Loughborough, which kind of put REDS on the radar for you.
Yeah.
How many years after that was it that you actually stopped sport?
About 2.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you stopped professional sport and then left it a little while. Then you went back to the doctor because you were like, oh, they told me this would fix it.
Yeah.
And nothing has kind of happened.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Weird PCOS diagnosis that didn't, or PMOS now, that didn't sit right with you.
Yeah.
Next steps after that, what happened for you?
Pretty disillusioned by this point with healthcare. I was kind of like, I think I've been to the doctors now 4 times about this, had 4 different outcomes, and none of them have worked and none of them feel right. And so I think for a while I just thought, I can't bothered. I just can't bothered. And I was like, I honestly, at that stage, I was about 23, and I remember sitting in my bed and being like, okay, well, I'm just not going to have children. I think that's probably like what this is going to be for me. My period's never going to come back.
Wow.
Maybe I've gone through early menopause. I was just like, I kind of think that's it. And I kind of made peace with that, which is like crazy, like for someone of that young age to not think that their health is worth investigating further. But I think it was a combination of that kind of just felt very dismissed, felt like no one, and I also felt trapped in the kind of cycle of eating disorders. And I felt like no one was there to help me, even though they were, even though I had friends and family who would have, if I'd asked for help, would have jumped straight to my help.
Yes.
But from a medical side of things, I think when I'm quite passionate about the fact that when people are quite young, they sometimes need someone to like grab their hand and do it for them. They can't do it themselves, especially when it's such a psychological condition that, like an eating disorder, that's this other voice in your head, that you've got your rational voice going, I should get help about this, but then this other little like devil on your shoulder is like, no, this is what you like, this is what's keeping you happy, this is what's keeping you in control. So I was kind of just shut off from it for a few years, basically.
It sounds very isolating to have an eating disorder. It sounds like a very lonely space to be in.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. Especially when it has been so like insidious, which I think it can be for some people that develop an eating disorder in their teenage years, and it's very abrupt and it becomes anorexia or something very quickly. It's often like picked up by parents and it's dealt with quite acutely. But in something like REDS and orthorexia and sport, it happens kind of slowly and it under the guise of health and performance. And like you're doing this for like a good reason. So then it's confusing because you're like, how did this become bad when I thought it was healthy? And I think that's the really confusing thing. And that's the problem I'm seeing so much now in the running space and the running world, not just with teenagers, but especially women in their 20s. I mean, people all over my social media feeds. I'm looking at them and I'm like, oh my God, this is a red flag. Like, this is not good. They look underfueled. They look like they're borderline eating disorder, but it's so borderline because they're still muscly and they're still training. And it can just get masked and masked and masked. And
you mentioned marathons before. You've seen that a lot with, because the marathon running and training seems very trendy, popular right now. And, you know, amazing that more women are going into sport, running, marathons. You know, I saw a post the other day when someone had done the marathon, the London Marathon. They talked about, you know, it was only so many years ago that women were banned from doing this. How amazing that we can now do it, and, you know, the progress. But yeah, it seems like with all social media things, trends happen. So is that kind of going on at the moment?
Yeah, I think the huge danger with it, I think it's so wonderful that more people are running, but a marathon it's not a recreational distance. It's an elite athlete distance, and anyone that is putting their body through that much training needs to also be matching it with the lifestyle that surrounds an elite athlete. So that is really great sleep, really great fueling, really great hydration, really good like muscular recovery, stretching, strength training. All of those things that surround an athlete that's training for a marathon has to be applied. But because it's sprung up as a really quick trend and people aren't surrounded by these support systems and they don't have the education of an athlete, a lot of the time they just do the running bit. Or they maybe do the strength training bit because they've seen that. But the fueling bit, because of, I think, female issues around body image as well that play into it a little bit, but also just lack of education, you can very quickly slip down the road of underfueling unintentionally, and then it just gets hold of you, and then it can be a problem. There's a really amazing sports dietitian called Renee McGregor, and I would kind of urge anybody that is listening to this and relating or thinks they might be relating to follow her on Instagram. And she's written multiple books because she talks so well about this like distance running, female fueling, and the lack of education and the things we actually need to know about it. Because I think it's just so easy to get it wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially social media is a powerful platform, but in that sense, it's very good at taking something actually very complex with lots of layers, which takes a lot of expert knowledge and years of experience and expertise, and making it look incredibly simple to say, anyone can do this. Just watch my day in the life video of how I train. Just copy that and you'll be fine.
Exactly.
And it's not the case at all, is it?
Not at all. And even though my REDS had a big psychological element, it can also actually not have a psychological element. Like, I mean, there will be in a sense, but it doesn't have to be a full-blown eating disorder. And that's what I also think people need to know is like, it can be unintentional. It can just be that like you just are underfueling because you didn't realise. And that can still cause you to be in this energy deficiency state, which will be impacting your performance, your health, your menstrual cycle as part of your health. So even if you definitely don't identify as having an eating disorder, don't think that you couldn't be affected by REDS.
Yeah. And I don't know, but I imagine with this trend on social media as well, thinking about if you go kind of from 0 to 100, or you start doing training very quickly for like marathon running or long distance running, I imagine if you're training that hard, you are going to see results. So I'm thinking about kind of the connection between body image that you've mentioned and disordered eating as well. I mean, how was body image for you over the years? Did that change a lot? Did you have more positive or negative times? How did it look for you?
I mean, there was definitely more after Louise gave me that diagnosis, or not diagnosis, but indication of potential REDS. And she worked with me very closely on like a nutrition plan for my training. That was definitely my period of probably best body image, because actually I got really strong, and I think I probably would have been on a road to recovery. Had I not then a couple of years later stopped sport. And then because I deemed there to be no need for muscle and strength anymore, which was silly. But this is what happens when you still have an underlying disordered approach around food and body, and you're plunged into a state of a lot of personal and emotional stress. Food becomes the control and the crux and the support. So I just sort of binned off everything that Louise had said and just started restricting what I was eating. And I think that best body image period was under Louise's guidance, and that's where it can be super helpful to have an authority there helping you, guiding you. So I definitely got to a more positive place, and then it just plunged into a very bad place again. For quite a few years, until last January 2025, which is I went on a bit of an eat, pray, love solo trip to Australia for 4 weeks.
Wow, amazing.
And I think I just kind of sat with myself at that point. I would have been about to turn 26 at the time. So late in my 25th year, into my 26th. And I was kind of like, this has gone on now for 11 years of no period. It's, food and body has controlled my life for that time to a greater and lesser extents, but for over a decade. And I was like, this sucks. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I have so much life to live. I want to have a family one day. I can't be bothered. This is too annoying. And also I'd now been a journalist for, at this stage I was still part-time, by the way. I wasn't full-time as a journalist, but I was part-time as a journalist for nearly 2 years. I was so much more educated from speaking to experts through my job, like the privilege that I'd had to work in women's health. I now was armed with a lot of facts. And I was like, this is definitely food related. This is definitely REDS, like initially REDS. And so I was like, I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to get better. And it was at that point that when I came back, I was like, not going to the doctors, not doing this with medical teams. I'm doing this with like private help. So I started working with a nutritionist in May. So for the first few months I did it myself, just from the education that I'd had from speaking to people through work and through articles that I'd written. I was like, right, I need more carbohydrates, I need more protein, I just need more food in general. And I need to be more mindful about my exercise. So I need to not run 5 times a week. I need to run once or twice and just do yoga and Pilates and more low impact strength training to look after my bones as well. And then got to May and I was like, okay, I think I need a bit more help here because my period's still not come back. Started working with a nutritionist between May and September. And then I also left my job in PR, which was important because stress really impacts your menstrual cycle. So not just physical stress, but also emotional stress. I was working a super high pressure job. So I think all of that was compounding together to kind of keep my hormones suppressed. So I left my job in July, was then full-time freelance as a journalist. And then in November, I actually started therapy to work more on the kind of emotional stress that I think I was holding quite a lot. And then at the end of January, so a year to almost to the day after I started trying to get my period back, it came back after 12 years. So it worked, but it took a full kind of whole body, whole mind approach to essentially stress, because RED is a stress condition, like physical stress, emotional stress, psychological stress. And that is what you have to address, I think, is look at every pillar of that. So, you know, the emotional stress that I was going through just from sort of unprocessed things that I hadn't dealt with, the psychological and just daily stress of my job, and then the physical stress of not eating enough. So once I kind of addressed all of those things for a sustained period of time, because that's the other thing people always say to me, I've been trying to get my period back for a couple of months. And I think the thing to remember is when your hormones have been switched off for years and years and years and years, your body needs time to adjust and rebalance and kickstart those chemical processes in your pituitary gland again. You know, like there's so much that has to happen, and your body has to feel safe enough to know you're not going to start starving me again, because at first it needs to just recoup the resources that it's been in fight or flight trying to hold on to, and then know that it's safe, can stay and rest and digest, to then start those processes again. So it takes time.
I mean, no period for 12 years. How did it feel to have that period after 12 years?
It was so cool. Like, I was literally like, I was in a changing room in South Africa trying on clothes, and like my boobs had been kind of hurting for a few days before. I definitely like noticed changes in my body. My hips were wider, and I was like, I think this period is coming back. I just had a sixth sense. And then it was so funny because I literally was in a changing room, and then I saw some blood, and I was like, oh my God, it was like surreal. I was like, I honestly thought this day would never come. And then I walked out of the changing room and there was a baseball cap there that just said period. And I was like, that's so weird. It was like a sign from God or something. I don't know. But it just felt amazing. I felt so feminine, I think. And I felt quite emotional. And I think, you know, it was also a grief process because it was letting go of a decade-long chapter of my life. It felt like very symbolically letting go of my issues around food, but also just so hopeful because I'd also shut off from the idea of having children, and then all of a sudden I was like, maybe I can. And I was also like, my body works too. That's so epic. Like that kind of outweighed all of the anxieties around body image or weight or whatever, because I was like, my body is doing something, like what it's supposed to do. And it felt amazing, really.
I can feel the emotion when you're talking about it. Like I can really get a sense and almost build like that picture in my head of just how powerful that moment is for you, because it's easy to say, 12 years no period, but it's like, actually, hold on, 12 years, like over a decade. That is such a huge amount of time, and it happened to you over such a significant point in your life as well, when we are all discovering who we want to be as a person, building connections to our body. You know, did you feel like you had, because you've talked about grief, you've used the word grief quite a lot actually in this conversation. Did you feel like you had a lot of your teenage years or young adolescence taken away? Did you feel like there was a lot of loss surrounding the conditions?
I think I definitely feel a loss of my sport potential. I think I wish someone had stepped in and said, like earlier, your performance is probably suffering enormously because you don't have the energy. Like it can also affect the kind of elasticity of your tendons and everything, which is so essential for like a bouncing, jumping based sport, it can affect your reaction times, your ability to kind of have fast twitch muscle fibers. There were so many times in sessions where I was just so frustrated as to why I couldn't perform when I was training so hard and I wanted it so badly, and it was like all my dream, and everyone kept telling me I had all this amazing natural potential. You know, coaches would always be like, you're just built perfectly like an athlete, and you know, you've so much dedication and all of this stuff that should have made me a really good athlete. And I feel like I wasn't, and I could never understand why. And I think honestly the hormonal imbalances were hugely a part of that. So I think there was loss in that sense. I also think there was I just feel really sorry for like kind of the teenager I was, because I was confused, I didn't know what I was doing, and I think you just need a bit of help. But then there's also so much, I'm so proud of myself, and like, because I've beaten something that was like, you know, holding a lot over me. So, you know, after that amount of time to have actually done it, I was like, can't believe this. And then I'm also incredibly grateful to the people that did support me, like the nutritionist I worked with, Hannah Cartwright. She was so supportive and amazing. The therapist that I've worked with, Renee McGregor, who just provided really great expert commentary for my pieces. Like people like Dr. Helen O'Neill, who founded Hypothalamic, like she spoke to me. So many like women that have defined my recovery from it, even if they didn't come from like the traditional medical, you know, NHS situations.
No, I mean, and what's really powerful as well is it's when you talk about holistic recovery, it is that 360 recovery. And you're right, there's so many different experts and people from different walks of life with different things that can help you that need to be part of that journey, like psychotherapy and nutrition and different things. But I remember you saying earlier that there are a lot of people in your life when you were still kind of competing or coming towards the end of that in your early 20s that clearly really wanted to help and could maybe see that you were struggling and going through something, even if it wasn't the doctors, that really wanted to help, and it wasn't the right time, and you said you felt you couldn't access that and kind of reach out to that. And what really comes through is that when it was the right time for you, you went out and did all of that. Like you went out there and you did that. Like no one actually forced you to in the end. No one really pushed you and said, no, you haven't got a choice, you need to deal with this. That was all you. It came from your own back.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where you do need intrinsic motivation to get through this. Like it has to come from you to start with, because if someone else is telling you and you're not on board, it's never going to happen. But I do also think that's where I feel incredibly privileged to do the job I do, because it gave me the knowledge, because I think the knowledge was what the motivation came, because before I knew what I was doing to my body, you know, before I understood how important the menstrual cycle was for so much more than having children, or like when I understood that it was such a vital sign of health and that I was maybe impacting like the length of my life, you know, like if I have terrible bones and then I keep getting fractures, my chance of death over 50 is so much higher, you know, all of those factors that started clicking in my brain of going, this is not just a having children thing. This is you might not be able to hike up a mountain when you're 70. Like you might be immobile and frail and in a wheelchair and completely like, and all of those things that I could prevent. And how selfish of me not to, when there's other people that are kind of putting those out of, you know, not their own free will. And I have a choice here to be healthy, and I'm choosing not to be. So I think it was that kind of clicked in me, but you wouldn't know that until you have the knowledge. So that's why we need the knowledge.
Knowledge is power, isn't it?
Which is why we need these podcasts.
We need these conversations, right? We need to talk about this. For those young women, older than you, younger than you, generations coming that maybe have been listening to this or are just out there on social in the world thinking, I think red sounds right, or I think that I am under eating, or I'm overtraining, or this conversation's just resonated. Do you have any advice? Is there a message you would give to them about looking back?
I absolutely hate the advice of just going to your GP, which is what always seems to be the advice, because I've had such bad experiences with it. So it's a really tough piece of advice to give, because what worked for me was that by the time I was, 26, working full time, I had the means to go to a nutritionist. So if you have the financial resources to go to a therapist and a nutritionist. That would be my gold standard piece of advice.
Yeah.
But I recognise that is not a position that like everyone is in by any means.
Yeah.
So if you're not, I think it would be to write down all of your symptoms, how long you've not had a period for, all the reasons why you don't believe it's another reproductive health condition, and go to your doctor armed with as much advice and confidence and clarity as you can, because often when you can present them with clearer facts, you can get more of what you want. So it's going and asking the right questions. So can I please have a DEXA scan? Can I have blood tests done? I suspect this is what I have. And going to them, not asking, but almost telling. I think that's a really important way to go. And if you can take someone with you who you trust, even better, because you might need to be strong in that situation and keep pushing doors that are closing in your face.
Yeah.
I think it is improving and there is more awareness out there. So hopefully people aren't going to have the same negative experiences.
Yeah.
But just to be aware and not to give up if you do have an initially not right experience. Your body knows best. There are also resources out there like Hypothalamic, which can do a lot of the diagnostic process. I think it costs around £200 for a test, but you can get a lot of diagnosis from them that can then signpost you onto specialists within more of like an NHS setting, I believe.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I think it can be obviously an investment, but maybe cheaper than having to go private with a nutritionist. So there's options there too. And then lastly, I would say to follow as many really credible experts like like Renee McGregor, like Dr. Helen O'Neill, those accounts, rather than just like a random wellness creator. Like look for the credentials, look for someone being a gynecologist, and seek those out online, because there is a lot of good information out there. And then lastly, read good magazines like Stylist, for example, who I wrote my period recovery story for. They produce some really great expert, credible women's health content, which is obviously, it's only going to give you knowledge, but you can do this on your own. So once you have the knowledge, it's good. So that would sort of be my plethora of advice.
That's an incredible, that's not just one piece, that's a whole kind of action plan with different kinds of steps for people at different stages with different level of resources. And what I love that I think it's really come through from our conversation is, you mentioned it before about periods and the menstrual cycle being a sign, like a vital sign of health. And I think the more we can move educating ourselves and the future generations and the wider healthcare system to think that way, it will be so much better, won't it? Because whether it's endometriosis or REDS or other conditions or pregnancy or fertility, whatever it might be, if we look at the period and the menstrual cycle as this is a really good indicator of, even as you're saying, like osteoporosis when you're thinking about older age, or how long you might live for, or the quality of life you might have when you're older. We're so short-sighted. I think we need to elongate that.
Your period is the most amazing, wonderful thing about you. Like I think it's incredible. I'm so grateful to have mine. Like having lost it, I'm like, I freaking love this thing. Every time it comes every month, it's maybe not the most convenient, but it's telling me that my body's working. Also, this is only the beginning of the journey. It's not the end, because ovulation is really what matters to show that like your hormones are in balance, and you can have a period without ovulating, as I'm sure you know. And so for me now, I'm cycle tracking using my basal body temperature every day and looking at my cervical fluid and educating myself, because I didn't even know that like why your cervical fluid changes throughout the month. I didn't know that. Like I was like, oh, we know when it's more slippery and kind of milky, it means one thing, and then when it's more like yellowy, it means another thing, and it tells you where you are in your cycle. And so by tracking these things, I can actually learn whether I am ovulating every month, because that's the final stage of recovery from REDS. You know, you need your period back, but then you need your ovulation back. And that's going to show you that you're in balance. So I think it's looking at this as something really that you can get curious about. You can learn so much about yourself. You can become so connected to yourself. And it's just going to stand you in such good stead for kind of all the stages of life that you go through, whether that's trying for a baby, menopause, whatever, and beyond.
It sounds like a real journey of discovery. And I love when you talk, you can see how excited and positive and kind of, it sounds like you've just got really curious, and it's fun to get curious because you're learning more about yourself and you're learning more about how you operate and how you can support your body. And that's such a beautiful place to be in compared to 12 years ago, which was confusion, disconnection.
and huge shame. Like I was just so critical and like ashamed of my body and like, you know, this is bad, this isn't right, blah, 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 blah. And then now I'm like, this is amazing. Oh my God, it does this. Like, whoa. And like when you start to look at your body with this really like excited, curious lens, like you say, rather than a shameful, negative lens, it's good.
And we haven't talked about it, but I want to quickly touch on it because you do now work as a journalist and you are completely in the world of women's health and you've written some fantastic pieces. You were just telling me before about a piece about endometriosis and medical trauma and things like that. And you write about all different kinds of things. Yeah. How has that kind of built your relationship with women's health from your own body point of view and just the general concept of women's health, being a journalist, being able to go and find those stories? What's that experience been like?
Yeah, I think for a start, kind of back to shame, I think it's really enlightened me of like all the things we don't need to be ashamed about that are so normal that so many women deal with and we don't talk about. So I think what it's done for me is first of all made me so aware of the huge lack in research and how far we have to go and how much lacking of knowledge a lot of women are, and there's a kind of a problem of body literacy and we need to change that, and it feels like my small way that I can contribute. And then also it's kind of eradicated that shame because I honestly think every experience at this point is normal. Like you know, there's nothing off the limit, off the cards. I want to write about people's deepest, darkest, most embarrassing moments that they've late night Googled because that's the parts that we need the answers to. So I think it's been pivotal for me in my own journey, and it also shows me how important it is because every time I write a piece like that, the amount of DMs that I get from women that are like, oh my gosh, thank you for writing about this. I needed to see this. I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel heard. I thought it was just me. And it's like, it's never just you.
No.
Like, you know, and I think that's so important.
Yeah, and you're playing a really important part, and it's exactly what we talk about a lot in terms of like why I started the podcast and the work we're doing of it's women's being seen, heard and believed, and those are such three key things that aren't happening across towns, cities, across the country and the world. And it's so pivotal to your identity and whether you feel like you can function, you have a good quality of life or not, you get answers or not. It's just the core of everything, isn't it?
Totally. And I think this is why I was so drawn to this podcast, because I think that's the whole thing, right? You need to have your experience reflected back at you. When someone listens to something and they're like, oh my gosh, that's me. Like it's so critical. I think it can be honestly the thing that makes someone go and get help or you know, do something about it because they suddenly realise that it's a real thing. Yes. It's not just in the head.
Yes, they're not going crazy.
No, not going crazy at all.
And I truly, hand on heart, don't believe that there is a single person that has ever late night Googled a question that somebody else hasn't already Googled.
Totally.
No, we're not reinventing the wheel. Like there are millions of weird and wonderful and out there questions, but you won't have been the only person in the world to have asked that question, even if you feel like you are.
100%.
Ash, you've been amazing.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I've loved it.
Thank you. I do have one podcast tradition for you. One last question, which I think the way you've talked about your story, you're so eloquent and you've just explained it beautifully. I think you're going to be very good at answering this question.
Okay.
So I want you to imagine that I'm not sat here. Okay. I'm not in this chair. But the person that is sat in this chair is a younger Ash.
Oh my God. Okay.
So she could be 16, kind of young teenagers, a few years older, 20s, you can pick. But if she was here, if you could see her and speak to her and say anything, what would it be?
I think it would be, you are worthy of help, you're enough as you are, and it's never too late to get better, would be. So
amazing.
Yeah.
Very succinct.
Yeah.
Very on point. I love that. Beautiful. Thanks you so much. I loved our girl chat today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you want more content about periods and women's health conditions, then make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening and watching. You can follow us on socials using @itsnotjustaperiod.uk. Head to the show notes for all the links and info about today's guest. I can't wait to see you next time. And remember, girls, it's not just a period.